Hey, it's Lori Neverman from Common Sense Home, and today we're going to be talking about blossom end rot. And I'm here inside our main greenhouse, and the tomatoes are coming along beautifully, except for, if we take a closer look, we do have some blossom end rot on the first tomatoes that's set. So today we're going to talk about what causes this and what you can do about it. And if you look, these are on the same plant here, and they came along a little bit later and they're fine. So there is hope. And we'll go through what caused this, as I mentioned, and then step by step some different things you can look at to save your tomato harvest. Well, first off, blossom end rot is caused by a calcium imbalance. Now, either there's not enough calcium in the soil or the calcium is just not available to the plants. So there's a number of things that you can do to make sure the calcium gets to the plants, and there's also a couple other things that you can do or avoid to help the plants stay healthy. First up, you want to maintain a steady level of moisture to your plants. If you have really dry conditions or really wet conditions, that can interfere with the calcium uptake from the soil and lead to blossom end rot. Now, here in the greenhouse, we had like a 2 to 3 week stretch where we had 90-degree temperatures outside, so it seemed like no matter how frequently we were watering, the soil in here just kept drying out. Now things seem to have leveled out a little bit, plus we put the shade cloth on, so that's evening out the temperatures in here. We also got the mulch down, so that's evening out the soil moisture. Now, second, you want to look at using a balanced fertilizer for your tomatoes. You don't ever want to use excess nitrogen. Like, you don't want to use something like just fresh cow manure with too much nitrogen, because that will stress out your tomato plants. They'll put out a lot of foliage, and it can also make it more difficult for them to absorb the calcium that they need and contribute to blossom end rot. Now, I mentioned the soil temperature earlier when I was talking about the moisture, and when it got too hot, you also want to make sure in general that your soil is warm enough but not too warm. So when you're putting your tomatoes out in spring, if you're transplanting out transplants, you want that ground temperature to reach at least 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Because if it's colder than that, that can stress your plants, leading to blossom end rot. Once your tomatoes are in the soil, you don't want to work too close to your roots. That's another one of the reasons that I really like mulch, because if you work too close, you can disturb those roots, and again, they have trouble taking up nutrients. And that can be another contributing factor to tomato stress, and again, contribute to the rot. Now, before you put your tomatoes in the ground, you want to check your soil pH, and that soil pH should be between 6.2 and 6.8. If it's lower than that, more tomato stress, they don't like it too acidic, so you want to add some garden lime to bring that pH up. And ideally, it's best if you check it, the fall before you want to plant. So as you're heading into fall, make sure your soil's kind of lined up, ready to go for next spring. Add that lime in so it has a chance to mellow out in the soil. Now, if by chance you miss this window of opportunity for soil checking before you planted, it's not necessarily too late to add calcium when you're planting or after you're planting. Now, I always add some either crushed up eggshells or a couple of Tums in my planting hole, just something to make sure that there's plenty of calcium readily available to the tomato plant. If you didn't do that, you can still pull back your mulch and gently top dress with a little bit of lime or crushed eggshells, or crushed Tums or something like that, and then that'll become available as you water the plant or when it rains. Now, finally, different tomato varieties are more or less prone to blossom end rot, and I've really noticed this in my garden, and I've actually stopped growing a few varieties because, like San Marzanos, if any plants were going to get blossom end rot, it was my San Marzanos, and I get every single season. So I just stopped planting them. Some people have great luck with them, not me. So try out some different varieties. I actually have a post detailing in more detail on the website talking about a number of different varieties that were tested at university, which ones were more or less prone to it, as well as the ones that I use in my garden that I found more or less prone to it. So those are the big things that you want to look for. Now some people say, oh, I water with Epsom salt to get rid of the blossom end rot. This actually isn't a great idea because Epsom salt is a magnesium-based salt. Now this can help with your blossom set, actually helping your fruit to set in the first place. But once the fruit is established, you want to ease up on the magnesium because it actually competes for the same binding spots potentially on the tomato that the calcium does. So if you've got a calcium imbalance and you add more magnesium, you can actually make the problem worse. So no Epsom salts for your blossom end rot. And as I mentioned earlier, even though we're dealing with this blossom end rot, I mean that's rotten, that's nasty looking, but I might be able to trim this bottom half off and still save the tomato. And it's from here on out, I think we've got things leveled out and we've dealt with the heat stress, and all the rest of these tomatoes look good. That's just a little bit of blossom stuck. So if you spot it in your garden, see what you can do to keep the soil temp even and the soil moist. Make sure there's plenty of calcium, and just discard the bad tomatoes and watch things, and the rest of your harvest, odds are, will be a-okay. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, leave a comment below, and also I'll have the link, if you're watching this on YouTube, to the post on the site for more information.